Mandalorian changed Star Wars forever. It opened back up what Star Wars could be and gave new life to the franchise. But now that we're getting a new focus on movies, the future of the show is bleak. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink, your place for everything Star Wars gaming, the TV shows, and the movies. Let's jump in.
Just you reconsider playing that message for him.
So we've gotten a lot of news on The Mandalorian recently, mostly around The Mandalorian and Grogu. That is the official stuff. But unofficially, there might actually be a delay or cancellation of Mandalorian Season 4.
Ooh.
And I think that could be quite interesting, and I think it would be really indicative of the change Star Wars is making right now.
Yeah, just a lot of the talk around, at least the new Disney people.
Bob Iger's
Bob
back.
Iger, yeah, and their shift to movies more than TV shows definitely checks out for Mandalorian, it seems.
Yeah, because when you think about it, like when Disney Plus launched, Star Wars was the big thing. Mandalorian came out, it was touted as one of the most expensive shows of all time. I think the budget for that show was like $120 million or something. It ended up being like, I think $15 million per episode.
Oh my gosh.
Which was unheard of in terms of television at the time. They were making a big bet to almost combat Netflix and change and try to like cement themselves in this new streaming space. And now that Bob Iger's back and after the pandemic, there's been a lot of change internally around how they perceive Star Wars in particular, how they see Star Wars and all of the other stuff as well. They're pulling back on Marvel in terms of what they're producing, focusing more on quality than quantity, because I think in the last couple of years they've had like 40 something releases around Marvel a year.
Oh my gosh.
There's been quite a lot of change when it comes to just putting as much stuff on Disney Plus as possible. And now it's time for them to pull back and actually focus on stuff that's actually going to impact things more directly. And I think that will be good for Star Wars, but one of the casualties in that fight will be Star Wars Mandalorian Season 4, I believe.
I'm really torn about that because like half of me is like, good. Like having Mandalorian as a movie will give it so much more direction and focus, and
it doesn't allow it to just like go off into the weeds, which I think will be its benefit and to its downfall for a lot of people as well, because a lot of Mandalorian is just doing the side quests.
Yeah, that's the fun of it. It's just following Din Djarin around and seeing where the winds take him. But it'll be really interesting to see more of a focus in a movie.
Yeah.
With a clear beginning, middle, and end. And they did kind of set us up in the third season for something like that.
Yeah.
It seemed like it definitely seems like we're going to need a clear direction of like, no, this is where we're going. Like we've started here / ended here. And so there's a very clear, like, I don't know what it's going to be, but there's going to be a clear line of like, leave your home, go do this thing, save the world again, sort of thing, I guess.
Well, Mandalorian Season 3 was such a period at the end of the sentence that it's almost like, okay, anything could happen, but also they kind of like closed it down for a little bit. They found their little house, they're having a happy little family, and then it zooms into them at the end. Like that was kind of the whole thing with Mandalorian Season 3. So it's a good spot to kind of like tie things to an end and then also set up whatever's next. Obviously, we've got the whole Thrawn stuff that's going on, so there's going to be some tie-in there more than likely. It seems like, from what we've heard, like around the creation of Mandalorian, a lot of what was in the Rangers of the New Republic was repurposed to be Din Djarin specific.
Oh, interesting.
And have him take up a lot of those pieces in Mandalorian Season 3.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of repurposing the material that was in that one show that was going to get them to the next step for Mandalorian Season 3 to be something entirely different. I'd say more so focused on what episode 2 was, where it was like this mythos around the mythosaur and the idea of like the Mandalorians as like a religious cult almost, and whatever that next step was for Din Djarin and the Mandalorians, that was the original goal. and now they kind of like tied that arc to an end. And I think Mandalorian and Grogu is going to be the next step for this.
On the other side of my for the hesitation part of my maybe, I just think they're gonna get away from the charm that was the first season of Mandalorian. First and second season were great, and they're gonna step away from. Well, I feel like they're gonna get into movie mania, and it's just going to end up being movies from here on out. Do you think they would go back to a show after a movie, from show to movie back to show?
I don't think. I think once Mandalorian goes into the movies, he's going to stay in the movies. And from the rumors that we're hearing and the reporting that we're hearing, Mandalorian season 4 is no longer going to be a thing. It's going to just be the movie. Previously, it was like up in the air whether or not they would continue the idea of Mandalorian season 4, but have it be a smaller season and then like have it lead up to the show. I think there's a lot of questions there. I don't know if we've seen many TV shows go to movies and back and forth done very well. So there's the idea that it's not quite been done all that much. Yeah. There is a benefit though of Mandalorian making it to the big screen. The big screen is real Star Wars. Even though like the TV shows and the movie, like the TV shows are great and a lot of people watch the TV shows, more people watch the movies. And after so many years between Star Wars movies, whatever the next one is, it's going to make it huge. Yeah. And Mandalorian being the character that like reintroduces Star Wars movies to the world, I think is going to be very good. On another positive that I think of is having it be a movie leads more space for like Ahsoka or Acolyte or Skeleton Crew or all of these other things to be more of like the intermediary between these big moment pieces. The movies are things that you can watch without much context, but if you watch the TV shows, it's going to give you much more enjoyment out of what's produced. Right. And I think it's going to be more so of the original idea where we have the movies be the main key pieces of Star Wars and then have the TV shows fill in the gaps in between those, whether or not it's the direct gaps between movies or just having something in between the gaps between movies in terms of the time frame of them releasing. Yeah. I think that's going to be a very different thing entirely.
I think that's good though. Like I feel like that's a good space for Star Wars is to have those really key moments, usually focusing around a family. Yeah. And then we get context of like what else is going on around in the galaxy and other characters and just more interesting, not more interesting, but like other interesting more moments.
Specific, like directed things. Because with a Star Wars movie, you have to have like big stakes and big explosions and like big things happening. Yeah. But with a TV show, you don't necessarily have to do that all the time. Like half the Mandalorian episodes are because he lost his ship or it got destroyed and he has to find parts to fix it. Like,
yeah. And that's great.
And that's fine. Like that's the story that you can tell there. But if you put that into a movie, it's not going to work. Yeah.
It'll be really interesting to see where it all goes with Thrawn kind of in the mix right now. It's like, is that going to end up being taken more by the Mandalorian? I can't imagine it would. I
don't think so. But it's got to be Ahsoka.
Right.
Ahsoka so then, introduced Thrawn. There has to be something there.
Right. So then what's the big bad in Mandalorian? Because I don't know.
Yeah, Moff Gideon's gone.
Allegedly.
Supposedly. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think there's a lot that they could do. I think this Mandalorian Grogu movie will be the beginning of whatever this next phase of Star Wars is, both from it being the first Star Wars movie, but also being a big key component and like pivotal part of whatever Star Wars ends up being in terms of the Star Wars lore.
Yeah. And just Star Wars as we'll come to understand it now. Because it seems like we're starting to walk away from the Skywalkers.
Yes.
So
yeah, at least partially.
Yeah. I mean, but for this to be a movie, what is it? The first Star Wars movie that doesn't revolve a Skywalker?
Solo kind of.
Okay.
Solo.
But, yeah.
You can't say Rogue One because Darth Vader's there.
Right. So, right. Yeah.
So I don't
big moment.
Yeah.
Big moment for Star Wars.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think what's going to be interesting is this is going to be one of the first movies that's revolving around a net new character. This isn't Mandalorian, like this isn't Solo. This isn't Rogue One where they have like this plot that everyone knows, but they don't know the full story.
Right.
This is completely new. They go off into something entirely new. They don't have anything that alluded to whatever's going to happen next from the TV shows or books or movies or whatever. This is entirely new to whatever they end up doing in Star Wars.
Yep. I feel like it's going to be very telling.
Yeah, there's no book.
No, there's no rules. There's no nothing. There's no, like, we have to get to this point in the timeline. There's nothing. There's it's just an open galaxy.
Yeah, which is really exciting. I kind of want that more. I don't think we need to have Star Wars be, oh, it's this thing, but retold in a different way, or it's inspired by this book, or it's a retelling of this one character's story. I don't think we need that. I would love to see more of what Star Wars can be. Like, what does it look like for Star Wars to be new and refreshing and try new things?
Yeah. And just to be different. I don't know. I feel like Star Wars has kind of gotten it into its rhythms.
Yeah, we've had over 40 years for Star Wars to be what it has been. And I think nostalgia chasing and nostalgia baiting is over. I think you need to take whatever these new characters are and do something interesting with them. And I think Mandalorian's a good character for that.
Yeah.
I do think it's almost like a little bit of a death of what the original Mandalorian idea was, of the smaller scale story that, yes, does impact the whole galaxy, but not in the ways that you would directly think.
Yeah.
It's not the Death Star exploding. It's not delivering the Death Star plans. It's not destroying the next version of the Death Star.
Right.
It's not the Emperor again. It's this Mandalorian that found this little dude and traveled across the galaxy with him. Like that's what the Mandalorian's based off of. And Mandalorian was like these side quests that ultimately slowly led up to something. And then once they got there, they kind of fumbled it a little bit with like the Book of Boba Fett and then Mandalorian season 3. So hopefully this is the next version of like, okay, we had the period at the end of the sentence. What is the next paragraph?
Yeah. I'm excited though, as far as thinking about all the other shows that will come out. It's like it does give it, like you were saying, it does give them room to breathe and just kind of be their own thing and fill in that role that Mandalorian did create in Star Wars.
Yeah, and not make it like the MCU stuff. Like it doesn't have to all connect directly. Yeah. It doesn't have to have like one thing spawns the next, which spawns the next, which spawns the next, which connects to this other thing that spawns the next thing. Like it doesn't need to be that. Star Wars should never be Marvel, because Marvel already exists.
Exactly. Yeah. We need something new.
Yeah. And I'm really interested to see where this goes in the future. And I do wonder, like, will we notice the lack of a Mandalorian season? Will we be missing that in any way? Or are we going to be happy with whatever the Mandalorian and Grogu movie looks like? Because when the Mandalorian and Grogu movie comes out, it's going to be 2026. And then it's going to be not long after when we get the next one, at least from the slate of movies that Disney has announced. So we might get 2 movies, new Star Wars movies in 2026. And then I think the next one will be 2027 or 2028.
Oh, wow.
So that begins the cadence again. And I think it's really going to let us know what the future of Star Wars ends up being. And I think we're going back to Star Wars is movies instead of Star Wars is Disney Plus.
Yep.
I think Disney Plus is here to stay. I definitely think we're going to continue getting TV shows and explorations in that direction, but I don't think it's going to be as big as this Mandoverse is becoming ever again.
I agreed.
I think there's a lot there that could be learned, and I'm really interested to see what this looks like, especially when you loop in stuff like the animated shows. We're getting the end of the Bad Batch with season 3. What does it look like for the next version of the Bad Batch? Because I think there needs to be something along those lines, because the animated shows can do something different. They have high stakes, but they aren't like galaxy destroying high stakes. They're very focused, and you can do stuff with this very much beloved era in Star Wars. And I think that's good to know as well.
Yeah, it's true. I didn't even think about the end of our animated show.
Yeah.
And
We're losing it.
With no promise of something else, like no promise of the next animated thing for Star Wars. And that, I agree. I think that's definitely a big gap that will be felt.
Yeah, I definitely think that, like, it's the area that they can do the most, like, exploration in and do the most experimentation to figure out what works and what doesn't work without having it to be this big thing. But while also saying some pretty big things.
If they think that Star Wars or Tales of the Jedi is going to, like, fill that gap, it's not. Like, that, you're going to have to do a whole lot more with that.
You're going to have those seasons be 26 episodes instead of 6.
And around one
8.
character.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. You
let's
can't
get
do
specific.
That. Yeah, I would love to see, what if we did, like, the Mace Windu season?
That'd be great.
People have been really wanting more Mace Windu stuff. Yeah, I think there's a lot that can be said around, like, whatever this next level of Star Wars is, and I hope that we get more in the animated, because the animated was what we got in Star Wars for so long. It was the thing that filled the gap between when Disney bought Star Wars to when they ultimately produced something. Like, that was the thing that held Star Wars fans over, and then we got a continuation of that, and there was just a lot to be learned in terms of those characters and the stories that they could tell, because they had 7 seasons that they could do that with, and 26 episodes a season. Like, that's an era of just TV and filmmaking and entertainment that just isn't there anymore, but I think it needs to be there.
I agree. I think we're going to get really... I wonder if they're going to try and make one of these new shows, be it Acolyte or one of those, if it's going to be like their next Mandalorian.
So. There are rumors that the Acolyte could be multiple seasons, and I'd be all for that.
Okay. Yeah. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated to see what this new era of Star Wars is, because it really feels like that.
It definitely is. I mean, we're getting a TV show that's something that started as a TV show into a movie, and that's huge. Not just a movie, the first movie that Star Wars is making. And that's going to be big.
In years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let us know your thoughts in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or contact Uplink Podcast if you are listening to this wherever you find podcasts. And as always, thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.